they're looking for all-rounded kind of people. They don't want someone who's very specialized in what they do, but then they can't hold a conversation with a client, for instance.
Welcome to this segment of the Careers Podcast. My name is Edward Gabriele, and with us today we have Julia. So if you could just introduce yourself a bit.
Yes, first, thanks for having me. My name is Maria Julia Pach. Everyone knows me as Julia, in fact. I'm from EY. I've been working with EY for these past 6 years now. I started in the economics department and still take part in that department. However, I'm focusing more on the climate change and sustainability services now.
Okay, what we're going to be talking about today is a bit about volunteering and how that sort of affects your career. So if you could give us a sort of background, sort of how does volunteering actually, how does it impact your career? Does it have an effect? And if so, how is that?
Okay, so basically to answer that question, I would like to just take us one step back before even starting my career at EY. So basically volunteering was always a passion of mine, okay? Basically, I was raised in a family where giving back was very much valued. And I started volunteering when I was, I think, 13 or 14, first in the parish church, and then always looking for activities abroad, maybe. So I went to do various volunteering experiences abroad as well. And obviously, when I went to work as an economic consultant, I started seeing another aspect of life. So before I used to go and help the people most in need, and then suddenly I was working in an economic consultancy firm where you meet a lot of large corporations, people who are quite wealthy and rich, and also working for the government. So that was a bit of, at first was overwhelming, because it was a bit like looking at both worlds and trying to reconcile them in a way. However, I realized that at work it doesn't have to be like always looking at the capitalistic kind of point of view only. Through our work, through economics, we can also bring good. We can also make impact on policy making, for instance. So in that sense, I started trying to bring in my knowledge from volunteering experiences into work. Obviously, this wasn't clear-cut, because obviously you have clients who are paying for their services. So I started by trying to include CSR activities, mostly. So in my work, I started, for instance, looking at opportunities where through our work we could help maybe organizations or people who need and require our services, but obviously maybe they need them at pro bono. So we started including that kind of CSR. Also, in the beginning, I think it was 2 years when I was in the company, we had won a competition for CSR from EY Poland as well, and we brought in funds and did a home gym for a poch. So I was trying to bring both worlds together whilst trying to remain faithful to both, kind of. Obviously, I think volunteering also helps you from the aspect of soft skills. So things that you learn when you're in an organization, which is an NGO, for instance, you can bring into your work. So obviously the confidence of maybe doing public speaking or actually organizing an event, time frames, time management, all that you can bring back to your career. And I think it does impact even the way you get along with other people, your interrelationship skills, that all you can bring back to your career and to your work and with your clients. So obviously you would have gained that kind of knowledge and expertise, which you get by time when you work with different people. So that you would have already a head start in your work then.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for that. It's quite insightful. So there are skills that are transferable.
Yes.
So from the voluntary sector onto your workplace. So do you think, following that, do you think that employers are actively looking for that kind of thing on student CVs? So we deal with a lot of students, obviously, who are soon to graduate, and they're going to start entering the working world on a full-time basis. Do you think that volunteering is something that's going to be sought out for by companies on people's CVs?
I think they do actually look at other extracurricular activities, because obviously grades are very important and obviously you need to be technical in what you are going to do. However, I think employers more and more lately, they're looking for all-rounded kind of people. They don't want someone who's very specialized in what they do, but then they can't hold a conversation with a client, for instance. So obviously showing that you're interested in other things other than just studying is important because obviously you need to develop holistically as a person. Also, I think it shows that you're trying to give back to society something. So I would recommend people and students who want to go into work to, yes, do voluntary work, and probably employers will look for that. However, I think it would be a mistake to just do it because the employers will see that on your CV. I truly believe that you gain a lot from volunteering. So apart from, yes, the soft skills, you gain a lot of relationships with people. You really create a genuine contact with people, which sometimes at work, unfortunately, especially now with remote working, we lack. So even being in that kind of setting where everyone is giving gratuitously, I think it's very important. And employers do value that because they see that someone really has a passion for something else as well.
So a lot of students, in fact, already do undertake volunteer work, and for a lot of students, that takes the form of volunteer organizations within university. But that being said, that's not all that there is available. There are, I think, opportunities for everyone in the volunteer sector. I don't know if you have maybe some from your own personal experience, maybe what you did, and you mentioned, for example, opportunities abroad. If you can elaborate a bit on that.
Yes, so basically usually the voluntary work I tend to seek, because obviously that's kind of my character as well, is mostly social, in the sense that I try to reach out especially to children. I did some voluntary experiences here in Malta, but also abroad with summer schools, for instance, so organizing summer camps for children who maybe come from disadvantaged backgrounds. I also did homework clubs here in Malta, so we used to go just help out with homework with kids who maybe their parents or guardians can't help them in their homework, so as to help them educate themselves more. I also went, that was obviously a one-off, there was an earthquake in Italy, and I had just gone to help for a week or two, basically to assist the people in the village, because obviously they were out of their homes, they were in tents, so just giving them their basic necessities.
So humanitarian aid.
Exactly. And basically just, I think all the volunteering I did was always based on trying to make the other person seen. So it's basically many of these children, maybe disadvantaged children, or the people who were in this earthquake, or then I went to India, for instance, to help out there as well. There's this sense that these people are so disadvantaged and we are so comfortable in our lives usually that we tend not to see these people. So I think that was my main aim in my volunteering. However, there is different, as you were mentioning, there are different type of volunteering. I know friends who go and help in animal shelters, for instance, so that could be your kind of thing. And also through organizations, as you were saying, with student organizations. So that's definitely a kind of volunteering which you can do.
So far we kind of talked about when you're a student. So you said you've been working at EY for a number of years now. Did you find you were able to continue doing some kind of volunteer work even outside of your workplace while being a full-time employee?
So that, in the first few years I was at EY, was what I was trying to do, like reconciling things by, in the morning, doing the job at EY as an economic consultant, and then in the evenings I used to do the homework club, for instance, etc. It was difficult to juggle because obviously I had to take some time off or try and work the break so that I can go and continue. So it was a bit like time consuming in the sense that you have to have good time management there. However, it is possible. I mean, there are various activities that you can do even during the weekend, so it's something you're passionate about. You would be willing to sacrifice those hours to do that kind of work. Obviously, the more responsibilities come with the job, the more difficult it is to try and juggle everything. In that sense, then, in fact, I was quite torn, as I was saying before, between these two worlds. So I decided to just stop for a year. I took a gap year and went to Amsterdam, at the University of Amsterdam, and studied international development. Because I really wanted, I felt my volunteering was very much touch and go. So you would just go, help for the summer, and then leave. And I really wanted to make a sustainable impact, like something long term. And that's when I came back. I studied poverty, inequality, injustice, and sustainability as well. When I came back to EY, I decided that, listen, yes, I could work for an NGO. However, EY has a very powerful voice in our society, in the business jargon, etc. So I decided that it's better to start speaking to businesses maybe to make that long-lasting impact. And that's when we started looking into more sustainability. Obviously, I think I was lucky because I came with the right skills at the right time, kind of, because obviously the market is warming up to these ideas now. So obviously, I'm very lucky that EY was happy to take on this challenge of starting to look into these services even in Malta. And so now we're trying to bring that change, and as our motto is building a better working world, through our job. So it doesn't have to be necessarily now volunteering after work hours, it's just making an impact at work now.
So you've managed to sort of reconcile the two.
Exactly.
You mentioned, in fact, a bit about corporate social responsibility. So this is becoming a huge aspect of all companies, in fact. And if you could maybe elaborate a bit sort of what are companies trying to do to be able to leave a better impact besides obviously their commercial arm. They're also dealing now on that side of things. So they're dealing with trying to leave the world a better place, if you could say that. So if you could maybe talk a bit about what are companies trying to do, especially because again it's not their primary aim. So they're trying to do it in a way where it's not just, I think, it's not just something on the side. It's something they're actively involved in nowadays. So a company like EY, for example, what projects do you work on, for example, that go along that line?
Yes. So basically there has been a long history of CSR. In Malta, we had always this idea of having CSR, one day off and getting all your employees to go and paint an orphanage, maybe, or like a cleanup, which is all very good, but that's just one-offs. And I think CSR now is evolving into something much more. It's evolving into just trying to take your own skills. So obviously, as economists and accountants, we knew how to paint. However, our expertise is not there. So we're trying to bring our expertise into the volunteering aspect, or as part of our corporate social responsibility, we're just pitching our expertise and bringing change with that. So for instance, if an NGO needs an accountancy service, which they can't pay for, obviously we will discuss amongst ourselves and see if we can, as part of our CSR, provide that pro bono. Again, if there are any reports that need to be done for an NGO, or for instance, helping them to apply for funds. So it's all trying to bring your expertise and doing good with that, because obviously you can provide much better services with what you know rather than just going and doing a cleanup. As I said, I'm not saying that you shouldn't. However, tapping into your own expertise brings much more benefit, I think, and fruit.
I think it's a very good point that you've made, in fact, that although we traditionally see it a bit as let's sort of take a day out and do something for that one day, there's a lot more to be gained as well, not only in terms of the skill set, like you mentioned, but I think the strength in numbers. So earlier you mentioned maybe earlier on in your career, you used to have to try juggle them as two separate things, but now that you said you're reconciling them, sort of the work aspect and the voluntary aspect, you're being able to utilize as well a company's infrastructure, their numbers, their employee base, that you can bring those things to the voluntary sector, and the voluntary sector then gain a lot from it. And like you said, so for example, with EY, you're bringing your expertise in the financial sector. And I assume then, if every company with their own individual expertise were to do that, the voluntary sector could stand a lot to gain, because they would be able to tap into resources from any industry that they require help from. So I suppose then my next question would be, do you think in 2021 and going forward, do you think students maybe students who are soon to graduate, have the option of maybe when they're thinking about where they'd like to work and when they'd like to apply, they can actually start now looking into this aspect of a company to see if maybe how their corporate social responsibility is something that they find relatable, something they can feel they can personally pitch to? Do you think we're reaching a point in the industry where students can actually factor that in as one of the things that determines where they want to work?
Definitely. I think as markets, we're seeing that, for instance, consumers are being more aware of the value chain of the company, etc. But it doesn't stop at being a consumer. It's also started being an employee. So obviously, I would want to know what my company stands for when I want to start working with someone. And I think the younger generations are becoming much more inquisitive in that sense. They want to know with what they're working, with what kind of values does the company embrace. And I think through the CSR activities, it's obvious that it shows it's not just an article on the newspaper showing that we hold these values. It's actually seeing the actions being done. So I think students should look at the CSR which is being done by the companies that they want to seek a job with, because obviously that doesn't only show what the company is doing, but it also shows what kind of values do they embrace, what kind of attitude and culture does the company has. And obviously there's, as I was saying, even in the different types of volunteering, there's something for everyone out there. So obviously if maybe something doesn't really resonate with you, I'm sure that there will be some company which does something which is in line with your values. And obviously we spend loads of hours at work. In truth, we spend so much time at work. So you really need to be something which is passionate, which you're passionate about. So I think that's important, that you just don't go to work just for the pay. So we spend too much time to just go for the pay, to be honest. So you really need to be happy with where you're standing and be comfortable with the culture of the company. So definitely, before even starting to apply, you need to see if the culture and values are in line with yours.
I think there is maybe some students feel that there's an old mentality that work is work and then everything outside of work is what it is. But like you're saying, I think it's very important that students start to see that, listen, your work life is going to be a huge chunk of the time you spend. So it's worth maybe putting in that extra effort to find something that really lines up with what you want to be, both in terms of the technical side and in terms of, like you said, the values. So in fact, we've been going on for a while, so I want to just ask you one more question, which is, what is your advice to a student, maybe right now still in their first year? They've got a couple of years, maybe a bit more to go to finish their degree. Some students we know already start working before that point. They sort of enter their career while still students, get work experience. What's your advice to them with regards to volunteer work? Sort of how do you advise that they go about it?
I think my biggest advice would be, I mean, we live in a society nowadays where we're just bombarded with trying to develop yourself, self-growth, self-development. We all take selfies. It's always around the self. And I mean, I don't blame students and I don't blame other people who are like stuck in this rut where you just try to improve yourself so much and the work is all about you, etc. However, and especially in COVID, we saw this. People were coming together, trying to be a community, even if we were socially distant, etc. I think volunteering really brings you out of your shell, out of your comfort zone. It does develop you as a person, so you do take benefits definitely from it, but also gives you this perspective that it's not all about you after all, that you're part of a bigger picture, and you do play a very important role. But the more you volunteer and meet other people and experiences, you will become a much better person, both in your personal life, but also at work, where you can interact with people and you're not just seeing work, as you were saying, just as work. You will see work as meeting colleagues, as trying to bring the best for your clients, etc. So I think volunteering is a first step to just get out of your comfort zone and start looking at the world as a bigger picture.
You touched upon it, so I'm going to ask you one more question. You talk about the comfort zone. I think that's something that a lot of students maybe struggle with. They think sort of, what can I contribute to the volunteer sector? Do you believe that sort of there's a place for everyone in the volunteer sector? Do you believe that everyone has something to give? Even if they don't currently believe it, they should still maybe go for it anyway and see where it leads them?
Yes, definitely. I mean, if you just speak to any organization maybe you're interested in, they would need an array of services, because obviously usual voluntary organizations, they do everything out of their own free will. They don't have much funding, so that's a big problem. So anything, some people would need logos, designs, someone to write content, someone to actually organize events. So it's really so vast. And even if there's no activity which you feel you can fit in, you can always bring up your own ideas and activities. So there will always be new ways, and actually it gives you a way to become more creative and innovative. So definitely.
So there's a lot to be gained from volunteering when you're a student, when you're in the working world, as part of your job and outside of it. I think we touched upon a lot of good points. Thank you very much, Julia, for joining
Thank
us
you.
today.
Thanks, Yusuf.
And that's the end of this segment of the Careers Podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.